I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now let's get this party started right, folks. Welcome to the Dark Wolf's Den radio show. Take it, chick.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider.
Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner.
Is it in her?
Important information coming up tonight, folks. Stay tuned.
What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. Is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? Real or just illusion, manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Coming to you from a secret cave, hidden deep within the wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live from a secret cave hidden deep within the wilderness of Tennessee. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic suit. We're tearing through the atmosphere, and we're tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Radio Show for Wednesday, August the 3rd, 2022. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we are going to be discussing one of the many 10 planks of communism. Plank number 2, a progressive or graduated income tax, which you are going to find a little bit alarming by the time we get to the end, I'm sure, as we may be a lot closer on this one than you would have thought. How close are we to communism, folks? We're going to go over all that and more, including what the Constitution says about it, here in just a moment. But first, let's go ahead and see who all we have out here in our YouTube chat rooms, both on the Ripon Rabbit Hole as well as the Dark Wolf's Den Show YouTube channel. How you guys doing out here tonight? Like Michael Fontaine, glad to see you out here, my friend. First in the Dark Wolf's Den Show chat tonight, he says, PhD out of a Cracker Jack box. That sounds about right to me there, Michael Fontaine. Sorry. He says also, let's go, Brandon. That is not my words. That is Michael Fontaine in the chat, as well as Sandy B says, hey, all U.S. love. Hey, Sandy B, glad to see you over here tonight hanging out, as well as JoJo's. Good to see you, always moderating. Also JoJo's Michael says, I sent you a link on your last video. I have to check that, Michael. I do apologize. It's been a bit hectic around here lately. You guys talking about Judge Judy over here. I don't know about her robe. I do know, and let me go ahead and switch to top or live chat now. I do know that somebody found some evidence the other day, and I was presented evidence where the gavel has come back. So the gavel may not be as gone as it was. Maybe not all the time, but there was at least one or two, I do believe. I think it was one scene that I seen where the gavel was back. So there's something interesting on the Mandela effect. Also love the Mandela effect, if you guys don't know. But this episode is definitely not about Mandela effect. Sandy B also over in the Ripon Rabbit Hole chat, as well as JoJo's and GPP Games People Play. By the way, was it last night? Yeah, last night. It was last night. I got to see a very fun and intense Tuesday night videos. Unfortunately, I was not able to participate. I didn't get the code right to enter the room on Kahoot. That was my fault. So by the time I was able to, it was already so far through the game that I decided to just sit back and watch it. Let me tell you, I am going to be honest with you folks. I love the 90s. The 90s is my thing. At least I thought I knew the 90s. Ladies and gentlemen, there were questions in that TNV that even myself, I was a little stumped at what have actually got wrong. And that's exactly what I was about to bring up. Games People Play, thank you for the reminder there, as they are also discussing that over in the Dark Wolf's Den Show. The winner of the game is actually not the original person that won. It was originally, I do believe, Tandy that had won the game. However, upon further review and review of the scores, Gracie, ladies and gentlemen, seems to be the winner of the Tuesday night videos. This is coming straight from Games People Play himself, the host of the Tuesday night videos. So I would like to go ahead and congratulate Gracie. Well done on winning that game. For as young as you are, you have really impressed me, especially with your knowledge of the 90s as a person who lived through the 90s. Again, I actually probably would have come in 5th or 6th at least in that game. There were some questions in there that were very stumping, very hard, very well done trivia game. Games People Play, and it happens once a month, folks. If you guys would like to be a part of the Tuesday night videos yourself, you can come on and try to win yourself and maybe knock Gracie off the pedestal this time. And I believe she's the two-time winner, by the way. Thank you, Earth Daughter. I appreciate the reminder. The two-time in a row champion of Tuesday night videos. That is following a family line from her grandmother, I believe, was also a two-time champion of Tuesday night videos, maybe even more than that if I'm not mistaken. Earth Daughter, great to see you also, my friend, over in the Ripon Rabbit Hole chat. But if you would like to be a part of the Tuesday night videos yourself, do make sure that you hop on over to the riponrabbithole.com, RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. You're also going to want to go over there and click on the top left-hand corner, by the way, and tonight's show will be over there in the chat room, available, a freedom of speech chat room, unlike the other multicast we do here. But do go over and check us out over there, because we will be cutting the feed at 45 minutes after the hour tonight and going only to the Ripon Rabbit Hole. But of course, you signed up for the Backstage Pass and you're going to gain access to the 24/7 Backstage Lounge, where the game is exclusively held once a month, the first Tuesday of every month, and it has a different topic. This month, once again, was the 90s. I love the 90s, and I love the 90s too, and I thought I knew the 90s, but wow, he got me. He stumped me on quite a few of those questions, so well done, games people play. It's a fun game, guys. You can interact yourself with all of the Ripon Rabbits and play along with Kahoot, just like the Beat Eugene shows here, also on the network. So again, great to see everybody out here in chat, and I want to welcome, of course, everybody listening worldwide also. And whether you are listening on YouTube and hanging out in the chat rooms, or worldwide on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network at the riponrabbithole.com, or of course on the replay on BitChute or Rumble, we're glad to have every last one of you guys along for the ride. That's right. And before we do take this wild ride, and a wild ride it will be, that I assure you, first, we have two more fun little segments to do, the first of which we call Today in History.
Hello, Mother. Hello, Father.
On this day in 1963, Alan Sherman releases Hello Mudda, Hello Fada. This would go on in 1964 to win a Grammy Award for Best Comedy Performance. And that was released on this day in 1963. And that is today's segment of Today in History.
Say what?
Our quote of the day today, folks, comes from Murray Rothbard, economist. He says, and I quote, "There can be no such thing as fairness in taxation. Taxation is nothing but organized theft, and the concept of a fair tax is therefore every bit absurd as that of a fair theft." End quote. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that was Murray Rothbard, and that is today's segment of
Say what?
And in my opinion, taxation very much is theft, and we will get more into that in the second half of the show as we talk about the Constitution and taxation and the progressive or graduated income tax. But what is a graduated income tax? To put it short and swift, it is the more you make, the more they take income tax, right? So if you make very little, they take very little. If you make a whole lot, they take a whole lot more. A lot of people see this as fair, and there's arguments on both sides how fair that this may or may not be. Karl Marx actually had quite a bit to say about income tax and progressive income tax, as this is plank 2 of the Communist Manifesto. Of course, I would expect nothing less than Marx to have a few things to say. Here is a couple quotes straight from Karl Marx himself. Quote, "Taxes are the life source of the bureaucracy, the army, the priests, and the court. In short, of the entire apparatus of the executive power. Strong governments and heavy taxes are identical. By its very nature, small-holding property forms a basis for an all-powerful and numberless bureaucracy. It creates a uniform level of personal and economic relationships over the whole extent of the country. Hence, it also permits uniform action from a supreme center on all points of this uniform mass. It destroys the aristocratic intermediate steps between the mass of the people and the power of the state. On all sides, therefore, it calls forth the direct intrusion of this state power and the interposition of its immediate organs. Finally, it produces an unemployed surplus population which can find no place either on land or in towns, and which perforce reaches out for the state offices as a sort of respectable alms, and provokes the creation of additional state positions, by the new markets which he opened with bayonets and by the plundering of the continent. Napoleon repaid the compulsory tax with interest. These taxes were a spur to the industry of the peasant, whereas now they rob his industry of the last resources and complete his defenselessness against pauperism. An enormous bureaucracy, well gallaned and well fed, is the Napoleonic idea, end quote, which is most congenial to the second Bonaparte. How could it be otherwise, considering that alongside the actual classes of society, he is forced to create an artificial caste for which the maintenance of the regime becomes a bread and butter question? Hence, one of his first financial operations was the raising of office salaries to their old level and creation of new sinecures. So he's speaking of Napoleon in this particular section, but he still is speaking of the taxation on the lower classes from the bourgeoisie, who are living the more prime time life, the more fancy way of things, right? Without the taxpayer feeling it immediately, but they necessitate as a consequence increased taxes. Of course, we know that the more they want to spend, the more we're going to pay for it in the end. That is why it is so dangerous the way the government spends money at times, and it seems so very out of control, because they are only going to tax us to get that money back. They are using our tax monies to do whatever they want to begin with, right? Again, in my opinion, taxation is theft. We will again get to that here shortly. But Marx calls for a graduated or progressive income tax to take place. So again, the lower level of society, the poorer of society, would pay basically nothing. The middle class would pay a little bit, and the rich, they would be hit with a very, very strong tax burden. And of course, that actually sounds good on paper to me, right? The rich should pay their fair share. But should everybody pay the same share, or should the rich have to pay more than the poor, right? One would assume that the rich would have to pay more than the poor. That would only make sense, even at a percentage-based tax rate. But taxing the poor or the rich more than the poor may actually be a little disproportionate, as it comes with a couple negative effects. And that is one reason why Marx was such a fan of this, because what he wanted to do was literally redistribute the wealth among everybody. So in this utopian idea of Marxism, everyone is on equal footing, right? The rich aren't existent, and the proletariat aren't existent. Everybody is equal in common. You all make the same amount. You all have the same everything, right? It's a way to bring down the bourgeoisie, or the elite, as we would call them today, or anybody who is rich. It's a way to also negate the drive to want to get rich, right? The desire, the ambition is the word that I'm really hunting for here. It destroys ambition. Why do I want to get rich if all my money is going to be taken if I get rich? If what I do is not going to be rewarded in some type of capital, in some type of way, why would I do it to begin with? Why would I invent things? Why would I have an ambition to try to raise myself up if I know that when I do raise myself up, it's only going to be worse on me, right? There's no point in it. It takes away all the ambition for people to start businesses. It takes away all the ambition for people to create inventions. When there's no reward there, when there's no reason to create something, then there's no point in doing it. And that's where a lot of the socialist issues when it comes to a graduated income tax come into play. Because if you are penalized for moving forward, for building a business, for giving people jobs, for doing these things in society, for gaining capital for what you have worked hard and done, for earning your way to the top, right? If you are penalized for that, what is the point of earning your way to the top? Nobody will want to do it. There will be literally no ambition. And that is one point of the Marxist playbook, is once you have the population used to this, then you are able to sway them into a populist agreement, right? They will accept the populist ideas more so than they would have before. A rule of mob law, like we are trying to avoid here in this country, of course, as we see things starting to play themselves out in a way that is clearly headed down the Marxist road, right? It's following the top 10 planks, or the 10 planks, I should say, of the communist agenda. Now, how close are we in this country to hitting the second plank of communism? You actually might be extremely surprised by the answer to that question. But before we do get to that answer, of course, I would like to read something out of capitalism.org. It's basically a better way of stating what I've been trying to say here. The so-called graduated or progressive income tax is a violation of the principles of justice, as it punishes those who are successful at creating wealth. The advocates of a graduated income tax, progressive taxation, are calling for justice. What they're asking for is not equal treatment under the law, however, for all individuals, races, genders, or incomes. What they're asking for is unequal treatment before the law. They demand the state to violate the inalienable, there's a word that I wish I had pronounced correctly, violate the inalienable rights of some individuals, to discriminate against them because they're rich. What are so-called progressives' meaning of fairness? It's a form of injustice known as egalitarianism. They're asking for what's called social justice. We've heard this word thrown around more so than not, right? Justice based on the moral principles underlying socialism. Another word for socialism, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is communism. That's right. According to egalitarians, it is unfair that some people are more wealthy than others. It does not matter to them whether that person earned their wealth through honest work and industry, or whether they robbed a bank, whether they obtained their wealth through economic production or by a political graft. The fact that some people are wealthier than others is proof of unfairness, since, in their view, everyone should be economically equal. Equal, that is, not in their right to life, liberty, or property, but equal in results. As people are not of equal intelligence, ability, talent, or determination, under a system of equal rights and equal freedom, some people will become more wealthy than others. We call this system capitalism, by the way, folks. According to progressives, it is the government's job to remedy this defect, or, in the words of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels themselves, for each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Yeah, that doesn't sound like the country I like to live in, folks. In practice, this means in today's, quote, mixed economy, end quote, a progressive government's job is to, quote, redistribute the wealth, end quote, of those with the ability to those who can garner enough votes. Sound familiar? A progressive tax is nothing more than Jim Crow reasoning applied to wealth creation. It discriminates and punishes an individual by treating people differently, not based on the color of their skin, race, or religion, or whether or not they follow certain ridiculous rules of society, but based on how much they make. It is thus a clear violation of their property rights, or, in the words of the American founding father, John Adams, it must be remembered that rich people are as well as the poor, that they have right as well as others, that they have a clear and as sacred a right of their large property as others have to theirs which is smaller, that oppression to them is as possible as wicked to others. So it shouldn't matter whether you are rich or poor, you should be treated equally under the law. Of course, the graduated income tax, the progressive income tax, does not do that. Most Americans accept the idea if two men commit a crime, they should receive the same punishment for the same crime. Equal treatment under the law for criminal offenses is considered just. If a congressman were to propose that for the same offense, Hispanics should be given longer jail terms or Catholics should never be subjected to capital punishment, he would be hooted down. When the subject changes from criminal to tax law, the concept of equal treatment under the law suddenly goes halfway out the window. Halfway, because there would be no support for taxing some groups differently. Higher rates for certain religious groups, racial groups, or genders. Such unequal treatment is still viewed as wrong. However, equal treatment does go out the window when one group is mentioned: the rich. And I think we can all agree with that statement. The graduated tax is in fact an envy tax, not motivated by love for the poor, but for hatred of those who are not. Or, in philosopher Ayn Rand's words, by the way, Ayn Rand is one of the favorites of Soros and Hillary Clinton, just so you guys know. Hatred of the good for being the good. Oh, and Obama's too, I think, is a big fan of him. Anyway, hatred of the good for being the good. If progressives were truly concerned with the poor, they would cry out for more freedom. Instead, what they have created is a spoils system where pressure groups battle politically to decide what to do with other people's money. A proportionate tax would be much better than a discriminatory graduated tax in this country. And again, in my opinion, taxation is theft anyway, so no tax would be better. However, that is actually written into the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we'll get to all that in the second half and what the Constitution has to say about a graduated income tax. That might actually be one of the most scary parts of the entire show. And as we go through the 10 planks of communism, folks, I want you to consider how close we are in this country to becoming a communist welfare state, right? How close are we to losing our Constitution, to not being the free state that we have always thought ourselves to be, right? How close is that line? And speaking of close to the line, folks, we are coming close to the line of the bottom of the hour, so I want to make sure that I remind you to go on over to the RiponRabbitHole.com. That is RIPON RABBITHOLE.com. Over there, you're going to click on the first square at the top left-hand corner of the page. When you do, it's going to bring you over to the page where we have the radio player as well as our own personal chat room where you will not be censored and your freedom of speech is very much appreciated and welcomed over there and intact. As the home of the Freedom Flame, the Ripon Rabbit Hole, we are proud to honor the freedoms that we have, the inalienable rights that we are given. It is something that we are proud to do. And what we are going to do at the 45-minute mark of this show, once again, ladies and gentlemen, is we will be cutting over to the Ripon Rabbit Hole only, and only be interacting with those on the chat over there. So if you want to continue to listen along and interact with us, I would definitely suggest going over to the RiponRabbitHole.com, as YouTube will go silent at the 45-minute mark. So again, RiponRabbitHole.com, RiponRabbitHole.com. I hope to see you all over there, as I don't want you guys to miss a minute of this incredibly important episode, folks. And I cannot wait to get to the second half, as we will be discussing, coming up in just a couple minutes, the American view on graduated income tax and how close we actually may or may not be in this country to fulfilling plank number 2 of the Communist Manifesto. Again, this might scare you just a little bit to know that we are as close as we are, because remember, last week we talked about private property, and we had to admit that the government really does own it all. We don't really have private property in this country. Thanks to eminent domain, they can come and take your property. They can come and take the shirt off your back, as long as they pay you a fair market value. That, ladies and gentlemen, is actually written into our Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. That is one of those many scary moments when you realize just how close we may be, folks. But that music means that we've got to go ahead and take a network break right here. So my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and you're listening to the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, Freedom Flame Series, plank number 2 of the Communist Manifesto, a graduated or progressive income tax. We'll be right back with the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, Freedom Flame Series, after these messages. Stick around. Don't touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, Jerry the Dark Wolf here. I hope everybody is enjoying this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, Freedom Flame Series, plank 2 of the Communist Manifesto, a graduated income tax, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, the RiponRabbitHole.com. Do make sure you stay tuned to the Ripon Rabbit Hole all weekend long, as we have a very, very interesting lineup this weekend. Tomorrow, Thursday, August the 4th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, I will be back on the airwaves once again with an all-new episode of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, as we cover plank number 3 of the Communist Manifesto, the abolition of inheritance. That's right, folks. What if your inheritance was no longer yours? We've got a lot to talk about there and a little time to discuss it, and I hope you guys join in tomorrow night for yet another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show. Then Friday, the Freedom Flame discussion series is postponed till next weekend, as there will be a very special backstage event. That's right, folks. Make sure you are familiar with the RiponRabbitHole.com over there, RiponRabbitHole.com. Go over there and sign up for your free Always Will Be Backstage Pass. We do not share, sell, or give away your information. It is completely secure, and you will be able to join us in the Backstage 24/7 Lounge for a very special episode this Friday. A Trump rally is occurring in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we have some backstage-only coverage. That's right, folks, some very special coverage from that event. Further details will emerge as we go on, but this will not be a YouTube broadcast. Once again, this will be a very special backstage event. and to keep up with all of the goings on the Ripon Rabbit Hole, once again, make sure you logged on to the riponrabbithole.com, RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. We now return you to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, Freedom Flame series, Plank 2 of the Communist Manifesto, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, home of the Freedom Flame, riponrabbithole.com.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, Freedom Flame series, Communist Manifesto Plank 2, the graduated income tax. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Folks, if you are just joining in the first half, we covered the entire Marxist view, in quotes from Karl Marx himself, about the graduated income tax. And in the second half, we're going to find out about the constitutional income tax in this country, the 16th Amendment, which actually creates the graduated income tax in America. That's right, folks. The graduated income tax that Karl Marx was such a fan of exists in this country. And of course, I don't think anybody is surprised to hear that, as the more you make, the more they take. Everybody should pay their fair share, as it's quite often said, right? Eat the rich, I think, is what was on the dress of AOC that one time. Eat the rich. I don't know about all that, but that sounds a little cannibalistic, a little weird. Maybe I'm taking it out of context. I'm not sure. However, what I will not take out of context is the Constitution of the United States of America. Specifically, tonight we are discussing the 16th Amendment in relation to the graduated income tax. And how did the 16th Amendment come about? That was an oops moment, if ever there was in politics, folks. There was a bluff that was called. This is an interesting story, and I would love to share it with you guys. Check it out. This comes from the archives.gov/milestone-document/16th-amendment. Far-reaching in its social as well as its economic impact, the income tax amendment became part of the Constitution by a curious series of events, culminating in a bit of political maneuvering that went awry. The financial requirements of the Civil War prompted the first American income tax in 1861. At first, Congress placed a flat 3% tax on all incomes over $800, and later modified this principle to include a graduated tax. You heard that right, folks, graduated tax. Congress repealed the income tax in 1872, but the concept did not disappear. You see, after the Civil War, the growing industrial and financial markets of the eastern United States generally prospered, but the farmers of the South and West suffered from low prices for their farm products, while they were forced to pay high prices for manufactured goods. Throughout the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, farmers and such formed political organizations as the Greenback Party, the National Farmers Alliance, and the People's Populist Party. All of these groups advocated many reforms, including the Interstate Commerce Act, considered radical for the times, including a graduated income tax. In 1894, as part of a high tariff bill, Congress enacted a 2% tax on income over $4,000. Now, before this time, the American way of the government to make money was to charge tariffs for use of the ports, right? For use of the area where the ships would come in, and charge tariffs on the products that would come in, and the other countries would pay those tariffs, and therefore the government would be funded. It was never meant to be funded by the people. However, in this story, we're hearing how that slowly changed by acts of Congress. In 1894, as part of a high tariff bill, once again, Congress enacted a 2% tax on income over $4,000. The tax was immediately struck down by a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court. Even though the court had upheld the constitutionality of the Civil War tax as recently as 1881. Although farm organizations denounced the court's decisions as a prime example of the alliance of government and business against the farmer, a general return of prosperity around the turn of the century softened the demand for reform. Democrat Party platforms under the leadership of three-time presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan, however, consistently included an income tax plank. There's that word plank. How interesting is that? And the progressive wing of the Republican Party also espoused the concept. So it's not one party against the other, folks. Even in these days, both parties played their role. In 1909, progressives in Congress again attached a provision for an income tax to a tariff bill. Conservatives, hoping to kill the idea for good, now this is where it backfired horribly, proposed a constitutional amendment enacting such a tax. They believed the amendment would never receive ratification by 3/4 of the state. They did this basically as a joke. They were assured that it would fail, and that's why they threw it out. However, unfortunately, their bluff was called. Much to their surprise, the amendment was ratified by one state legislature after another. On February 25, 1913, with a certification by Secretary of State Philander C. Knox, the 16th Amendment took effect. Oops. Yet in 1913, due to generous exemptions and deductions, less than 1% of the population paid income tax at the rate of only 1% of net income. This document settled the constitutional question of how to tax income, and by doing so effected dramatic change in the American way of life. And did it ever affect changes? We have seen income tax rates rise and fall over the years under different regimes, if you will. And the income tax as it is perceived now is written into the Constitution, folks, so it is just as American as apple pie, even though it is part of the Communist Manifesto. That's a little scary to me. I don't know about you guys, but then again, on the other side of the coin, there are good and bad sides to every single political system. Some of them share different sides. Some of them share the economic way of doing things. For instance, even though Marx thought that the overtaxation of the rich would kill the ambition for the business owner, for the person to create more and build more, and would take away from that. It has seemed to not be the case in today's capitalism society and free market as it should be. Anyway, I don't know how free our free markets are. That's a discussion for a whole other day. However, the argument of taxes still happens to this day, whether they are legal or illegal, whether tax is theft and it's not constitutional. However, it very much is constitutional, ladies and gentlemen. I learned that recently myself. I did not realize how constitutional that it really was. I was a little ignorant on this particular part of the topic, I'm not gonna lie. So it's been really fun to give you guys what I have learned along the way. But the question still comes in, even if it is constitutional, is it right? And I would, point to a number of constitutional things in the past that have been repealed that were wrong. I can think of a few they're trying to put in now that should probably be repealed, but that's another discussion for another day. That said, I would also like to present to you guys the libertarian point of view, because we look at the left and right, the Democrat and the Republican, but we rarely look at other points of view. And the libertarian Judge Napolitano speaks a large volume to the idea of taxation. Is taxation theft? even if it is constitutional? Is it theft for the government to come take your money and use it as they see appropriately? The other question comes is whether or not they use it appropriately, but again, another discussion another time. Before we go, I would like to play a small segment from Judge Napolitano. This is an interview from a channel on YouTube called Reason TV.
So where does taxation fit into that? So the income tax as opposed to excise taxes, because the federal government, before we had a personal income tax, most of their money came from tariffs and excise taxes. Are those moral and income tax immoral, or are both moral? Or
you're home at night and someone knocks on the door and you answer the door and there's a guy with a gun and the guy says, "Give me your money, I want to give it away in your name." Was this guy crazy? You call the police, you find out he's an IRS agent. So that's what taxation is. It is the government extracting money from you against your will to give it away in your name. I'll say this plainly, I've said it before. Taxation is theft. It presumes that the government has a higher claim on our property than we do. When the government imposed excise taxes, that was a user fee. You want to use the government's port. The government owns the water and owns the earth. It shouldn't, but it does. You have to pay for that right. So before the war between the states, the central government existed by user fees. It existed by selling government land. Government still owns, 88% of Nevada. That's a lot of land. And it also existed by imposing burdens on the states, financial burdens, for the services the central government performed. That's the way it was intended to be. After the 16th and 17th Amendments, the Senate is no longer representative of the states, and the feds can take a portion of your income tax. The feds take whatever they want. If those two amendments alone were to be repealed, the government would go back to the confines of the Constitution almost overnight.
So what are your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen listening along? I would love to know, and if you want to speak freely and openly about your thoughts, we are going to cut the YouTube feed in less than a minute here, so make sure that you have hopped on over to the riponrabbithole.com, RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. Over there, you're going to click on the first banner at the top left-hand corner. It's going to be tonight's show banner. It's going to take you to a new page. You can hit the play button on the radio player, continue to listen along over there, and chat freely and openly, unlike you can do on the surrogate platform that we also broadcast on, multicast on, of course. So we are going to cut that broadcast in 3, 2, 1.